domesticated animals. But the problem is where to gather and where to they gather, because there was no earth, no planets, because no solar systems yet. But foolish fellows, they gathered. So we have to go into the real meaning of the words once again. Take down the glossary of 3 words, which means something. Pashu means beings tied by strings to a center. Pashu, yes.
This is the beast.
Yes.
There.
Generally, the word is used for beasts, but the word means exactly this. So the pun the poet makes is one the popular meaning and the other the etymological meaning. He makes a pun of the 2 meanings. So first, they gathered again from all directions the droplets of the clarified potassium, and out of it they made beings who are tied down to the center. That means the many ions are tied down as the centers. That means they first made the centers of expression of the same Purusha who existed everywhere. And they made also lines from center to circumference and circumference to center. That is, first they sprinkled from center out, and then they gathered from the center to, from the circumference to the center. So first they made it in one way, and then they made it the other way, centripetal and centrifugal, and made it possible to have the beings polarized. So according to this formula, afterwards there was the construction of the solar systems, because the sun is formed as the center of the whole system. Also what we call the atomic centers, centers of the atoms, and also what we call the permanent atoms are the egos, around which everything is fabricated. That is what is meant by Pashu. The word signifies a number of meanings according to the context. It is a mystic word used. In us, the created beings, it signifies the instincts and the habits, because they are tied down to the nature, the center of our nature. And the second one, Vayavya, the beings in the air. That is, they produce centers of air, or an expression of what we call pulsation. And they made the first centers the centers of breathing. So the whole solar system was first made to have a center and then made to breathe it or produce what we call the principle of air. Afterwards, the same formula produced the beings whom we call the birds. Because in matter also the same principles work. So they produce the activity of respiration. First pulsation, then respiration, and the beings with respiration. And also, we have to make a special note of the technical word Aranya. I told you about a literature, Aranyakas. When I was talking to the various branches of Vedas in the first introduction, I told you there was the original text with the explanations called the Brahmanas, the Aranyakas, and the Upanishads. Aranyaka means something which explains us about an instrument called the Arani made up of wood, two pieces of wood, moving to produce the fire in the sacrifice. Aranyas means the beings that are produced out of this instrument called Aranya. So to say, from the centripetal and centrifugal activity they have produced what is called the phenomenon of friction, cohesion. Friction. See, what we call and automatically there was the manifestation of what we call the fire. So they produced the beings of fire through friction. Previously, the Devas existed as potentials and the Devas of light or consciousness. Then they existed as manifest Devas or the Devas of what we call electricity. And then they produced the Devas of the third fire or fire by friction in the language of the Tibetan. The Tibetan explains us how there are three fires. The one is
the lowest one is friction.
the lowest one was the friction. The second one is
Solar fire.
solar fire or the what we call electricity. And the highest cosmic fire or what we call the light of the Lord. So three fires exist as the breath of this creation. Here the Devas at this stage they produce the fire by friction and they produce the five devas. That means they produced what we call the solar globe or the sun into objectivity. Previously the sun was there in the potential state. In every point of space, the sun exists as the spiritual sun or the potentiality of the omnipresence. What we call space is nothing but the omnipresence of the sun god. It's called the spiritual sun or the invisible sun. And then there occurs a center where the sun globe makes its appearance. Appearance means a second one to the original existence. That is what we define as appearance in the Vedas. There is a group of literature, a number of hymns in the Vedic text. That particular section is called the study of what we call objectivity. The branch of the study of what we call the birth of objectivity. That particular branch is there, which is called Aitareya in the Vedas. Aitareya means the science of the origin of objectivity. The science of the origin of objectivity. That is, it explains us what is objectivity, how it occurs in creation, and how it is received by the created beings, and how it is understood. See.
Is it from there that we have illusion, Venu and Maya?
Yes, objectivity in the Vedic texts is named as Maya in the later philosophy called Vedanta. In the philosophical school they called it Maya. In the Vedic school they called it Aitareya. The word Aitareya means objectivity, the word Maya means illusion. See, of course, with due respects to the Vedanta school and its founders, objectivity has something more than what we call illusion. In fact, the later Vedanta school or philosophy has reduced the the value of the study, because they took the illusion aspect of it only. But here in the Vedas, the difference is, they say that the true existence and the illusion put together is what we call the truth. That is, one of the Vedic mantras says. So they define truth as truth and illusion put together as counterparts. See, if we ignore this aspect and study only the Vedanta school, we will not be capable of comprehending all the mysteries of creation in the cosmos and the cosmic plane. Because illusion also exists as a part of the truth or the phenomenon in creation. Otherwise, we are nowhere to understand the whole thing. That's why this caution is given by the authors of the Aitareya literature, that is the literature on the birth of objectivity. First, they cautioned us to remember the formula that what you call truths and what you call untruth put together we call the sum total the truth. It is absolutely necessary to remember this formula because there is truth and there is untruth. But that truth is relative to the person who observes the truth, and that untruth is to the person who understands it as untruth. So to itself both are counterparts of truth. About this, there is a Vedic hymn of 24 lines. Just for interest, I tell you, the first line says so. Your truth and your untruth put together form the two parts of our truth. That is the first line. The second line is, what you know and what you do not know put together form the two counterparts of what we call knowledge. That's the second line. The third line is, what is good to you and what is bad to your judgment put together form the two counterparts of the total which we have to understand as good. Like this we have 24 lines in one of the Vedic hymns. And also there is a funny line, what is light? Is light to your eye? What is darkness? Is darkness to your eye? Both put together as counterparts, we have to know it as the two types of light. So such statements, 24 statements are gathered into one hymn of the Rig Veda, which is called the hymn of the day and night. It's called the hymn of the day and night. And the next one, there is a funny hymn, a conversation between Mr. Day and Mr. Night. There is another hymn. The next hymn, the day and night, the king and queen, they talked. The night asks some questions, the wife, and the husband, the day, answers the questions. We have a funny hymn in the Rig Veda. Of course, it explains many things. And after that, we have a hymn called the hymn of what we call the night, or darkness. Like that, this part of the Vedic literature is wonderfully peculiar, unique in its own way. That is the science of the birth of objectivity. So here, the Arani indicates the birth of what we call the fire by friction and the fire devas, and what we call the objective sun globe being born. The sun who is second to the original, which we call the space or sky. The second to the original means objective. So he is called he the son, Asavaditya. That means the same fellow to be called as third person, he. The I am becomes the he is or the sun glow. So in that sense, they have brought the beings of objectivity or the beings, the product of friction, paranya. And then the next one, Gramya, also requires a special note. The word Grama means group. And later the village is called Grama because a group of houses.
A group of, please?
Houses.
A group of.
The word means group. For example, in the music textbooks, science textbooks, they call gramas, that is groups of modulations of scales of music, sounds. If they gather a group of sounds that is sonorous, they call it one grama or one group. In many sciences the word is used like that. And here also it is commented. Grama means group. Gramyas means clusters of beings clusters, bunches. That means then they produce whom we call the groups of the products of Deva activity, whom we call the galaxies, the constellations, and the various shapes of the constellations, which we call the beasts of the heaven in the Old Testament. You find in the book Genesis and Exodus, you find the beasts of the heavens. They were inherited by the sons from the fathers according to the Old Testament. How the patriarchs distribute their own beasts to their sons in the Old Testament. The father distributed the number of sheep to one son, number of bulls to another son, number of servants, male and female, to another, like that. That means the constellation of Aries, constellation of Taurus, and constellation of Gemini, like this. They are constellations. They say the sheep are given to one son, the bulls and cows to another son, and servants, male and female, that is Gemini, given to another son, like that. So the father distributed the beasts of the heavens. If we study Abraham, the story of Abraham in the Old Testament, in the end he distributed his property to his sons and walked with the fathers. That means he lived one with the time as God, as the cycles. It's all the pure language of the scriptures. You find the same type of language in the scripture of any nation, because it was the common language used by the authors of the scripture. and clusters of beings. You can take it as the first four beasts of heaven called fire, air, water, and earth. In the fifth beast called space. It is said that the four beasts are grazing the fifth one, eating the fifth beast, space. Old Testament. You will find these things, cryptic passages in the Old Testament. There are four beasts standing and eating, grazing the fifth beast called space. And all these things are revised in the final design or emblem or pattern in the form of a big mechanism of wheels within wheels in the book of Ezekiel. You find the description of the Ezekiel's wheel. The being coming with all the wheels within wheels. That is, the big ages containing the smaller cycles called centuries. They contain the smaller cycles called the years containing months in cyclic order, and the days and the hours like that. Smaller cycles being included in the bigger cycles, the whole machine moves to the front and makes its vision to Ezekiel. Like this, clusters of beings means like this, and also the galaxies and the constellations. And finally, the same model is maintained when we see the Devas forming into the same clusters in what we call a seed to germinate and produce the whole tree. For example, the banyan seed, the Devas are there in the potential stage, who preserved the tree, the whole tree with all its parts, on the planes of recollection to produce it again to the plane of matter or material. That is what we call the germination. So the Devas arrange themselves in clusters in the seeds, and the seeds also the Devas arrange in clusters in a fruit. If you see a banyan fruit, you will see hundreds and thousands of seeds arranged in clusters. So the model of the fruits with the seeds and the model of the body of the female being with ovaries and eggs, all these are the groupings or gramias. That is the same principle applied up to the level of the physical plane. See? So we have the literal translation now of the whole passage. From the above said sacrifice, above said sacrifice called the all offering. It is called all offering because they did not preserve something for themselves. The Devas, they offered everything. So from the above said sacrifice of all offering, they gathered the clarified butter once again. Clarified butter once again. Full stop. They made out of it the beasts that are tied to the center, that are tied to the center, comma. Then the beings of the air, and the animals of the forest. The animals of the forest. And the animals of the village. And the animals of the village. Full stop. Within brackets. They have produced the products of friction. And the clusters of existences. That's, you close the brackets. So that is in short the 9th stanza. We can just have an idea that first there was a sprinkling from center to circumference, and then a gathering from circumference to center. And the center and circumference is formed like this. Let it be to the solar system, or to the atom, or to a living being, or to a cell. That's why, we described yesterday the Lord of equilibrium, or the Lord of existence, or pervation. He is having two wonderful emblems with him. One is the spiral which establishes the passage from center to circumference in the form of a conch. You will find in one hand of Vishnu the conch shell, which has the ridges from center to circumference. And then you have another in the hand, the revealed rotating wheel of fire. It is represented like this, with a hole in the middle, the hole in the center. This fellow, this form of the Purusha called Vishnu, is represented as having the shell conch in one hand and the wheel with his finger inside, revolving around his finger in the second hand. See, they are the emblems of the centripetal and centrifugal activities of the creation. And this fellow is said to have more than 2 hands, this Vishnu. In a third hand, he holds the lotus, which is the emblem of unfolding of the petals of the whole universe. A lotus. And in another hand, you will find a weapon of this shape. If you see the pictures drawn by an artist, a picture of Vishnu, you will find these 4 in the 4 hands of the fellow. This is the emblem of the solar system pouring down into the lower kingdoms, the existence of life. The model of which is maintained in the human embryology as the head and the spinal cord. It is our head and the spinal cord put together form the real man, the person in it. The remaining is instruments. So these 4 are called the emblems of the Lord as Vishnu, the personality as Vishnu, the capacity of the Lord of pervasion and equilibrium, Lord of existence. Have you seen the picture of Vishnu drawn by artists previously? Any one of you? He has this 4. He is making an exhibition of all the 4. Why so many hands, you may ask? Why 4? Why not 2? Or why not more than 4?
What we saw in this building when we were there,
Yeah.
this was another, had also 4 hands.
Pardon?
It had also 4 hands.
4 hands.
Yes. In the building here, in the International Center. No. Who was it? No. It was
What is he holding?
No, it was with S.
Saraswati.
Saraswati.
Ah, yes, yes.
But they had also 4 hands.
Yes, yes. Every deity of existence is having the Vishnu as base, the existence. Therefore, it is 4-handed. And if you find a musical instrument in the hand, it is the deity of wisdom, learning and knowledge, called Saraswati, who is equivalent to the Minerva of the Greek mythology. Minerva. That is the goddess of learning and wisdom and teaching. Because in her hands she is having an instrument according to the Indian scriptures, Veena. Like this, she is holding an instrument, 7 strings musical instrument, and 33 small steps. This is emblematic of the instrument of learning, that is the head. And then the generative portion. These are the skills of the gamut of our intelligence. Having the 7 musical scales as sound expressions. And these are the bones of the vertebral column, which mark the various levels of consciousness through which we are expected to awaken. And she is described as singing her song on this. So that emblem which you have seen is the emblem of the Indian Minerva. It is Saraswati, this god, the goddess of utterance, sound, word, learning and teaching. And then we try to proceed to the 10th one, 10th stanza. The same thing as it is in the previous one. The same as the previous one. Tasmat yajñāt sarvahutah. Rijaha samani. Rijaha samani. Jagire. That's the second line. That's the third line. Chandamsi. Chandamsi. Jagire. Tasmat. Yajus. Tasmat. Aja Vaya. Aja Vaya. Tasmat Yajñā Sarvahutah. Raja Samani Jagire. Chandamsi Jagire Tasmat. Yajus Tasmat